I'm Janet Sheriff, and welcome to Kissing the Cod, All Things Gold. It's a pleasure to welcome Rob Bruggeman today from Canstar Resources, who has my favorite TSX-V symbol of all times, ROX, rocks. I don't know how you scored that one, Rob, but congrats. And on the company too. So welcome, Rob. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here. Appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit about myself and Canstar.
So it was, finally, we've known each other for a bit, but all through COVID, it's all online. So I finally got a chance to meet you in person, which was a pleasure, and spend a bit of time with you. And yeah, just really kind of maybe start by just talking a little bit about yourself and your background.
Sure, yeah, because I think I'm a bit of I have a different background than a lot of people in the industry. So I'm not a geologist. And I'd say really what drives me more than anything else is I love information. And so for much of my career, I've been an equities analyst, and that's either just covering companies or for a while I worked for one of the big Canadian banks, and we invested the bank's money, which was a lot of investment in mining and oil and gas, but especially mining. And so I guess my academic background, I'm an engineer, and also I specialize in finance. So I have an MBA, which doesn't really come in that useful now, and a CFA, but those are all very helpful for the investment industry. And just kind of make a long story short, I guess, when I left equity research and investment, I wanted to continue on with equity research and investment, but really for myself as opposed to for the bank or somebody else. And so I looked at various industries, and I said, where can I take my skills and really add value? Because in theory, if you've taken finance, in theory, the market is supposed to be efficient, so information gets processed. Well, the prices reflect the information that's available. But we know in mining, and especially in junior mining, that is not the case. There are so many factors, and there's so much information in terms of the rocks and jurisdictions and metallurgy and just the geological uncertainty. And so it's a very interesting space, because if you can get an information edge, and that's really what research is about, then there's fantastic upside. So yeah, it's sort of driven by the interest in research, and then I guess you could call it greed in terms of the upside potential on the equity. But then the other thing I've really become quite fond of is the people. It is a relatively small industry. We see each other at conferences and have crossed paths in the past. And so, between the information, the people, and then the potential, I think it's such an exciting industry to be part of. I guess tying that into Canstar, this is the earliest exploration I've been involved with in terms of the companies I've been part of, and that was by design, kind of, because I said, big part of the mining industry is mineral exploration. And that's also, when you look at those big returns, the 10 baggers, 20 baggers, or even more sometimes, it tends to be on discoveries. And so what I wanted to do is get into something where it was early stage, and I could really, through building a good team, absorb some of their knowledge and become a better investor in that early stage exploration stage. So that's kind of what I've been doing, and that's what I'm doing with Canstar. And yeah, so far so good. I think we've got an exciting project in Golden Bay in Newfoundland. I think Newfoundland is just a fantastic jurisdiction with major potential. And then we've been building an excellent team and doing a lot of work where I'm learning along the way in terms of finding gold on a very big property.
I do want to get more into Canstar, but being an engineer and then getting into equity analysis and research, very different than junior exploration. And I think a lot of people don't realize how how much you have to stretch a budget when you're in junior exploration to try and maximize the time in the field, versus the budget that's in the bank to get to that discovery. And it's so it's always a whole new skill set to learn. But I'm curious, where did you study engineering? What kind of engineer are you?
So I ended up being a civil engineer, which is somewhat applicable, but really I kind of went through engineering not really knowing what I wanted to do. And even back then, I wasn't sure. I liked engineering. I was very analytical, but I also really liked business and finance. And so I went to McMaster University, which is in Hamilton, Ontario. And it's because they basically took the engineering program and the business program, combined them into a 5-year program. And so that's what I did, which I was quite happy about having both disciplines. But yeah, I was a naive 18-year-old going into that program, and I said, "Oh, engineering, yeah, this is going to be pretty cool. I'm going to build things." Well, it turned out it was just applied math and then more math. None of it particularly exciting or applied, and so I started out thinking I was going to do electrical. Then went into civil thinking, okay, well, at least I'll get to build some things, which again, we learned about structures, but we didn't actually build anything. But it's a great analytical base for learning and for problem solving. So I certainly don't regret taking engineering. I think it's a fantastic discipline. It teaches you, certainly how to analyze numbers, whether I guess they're financial or otherwise. And then, to have a good problem solving discipline, which you certainly can use in mineral exploration. Although, the other way I view it is geologists tend to be dreamers. So you can put a geologist on a project and they can talk about, this looks like, this other major deposit, and I see these similarities, and they're dreamers, which you need at that stage. The downside of engineers is they're very good at killing projects. So they're very good at coming in, and that's again because of the training. You're taught to worry about risk and minimize risk and use risk factors and stuff. And so that's something that have to be cognizant of, because what you don't want to do, especially not at an early stage, is to kill something. You got to truly test it, give it an opportunity. As you said, though, manage the budget. That's absolutely key. So spend wisely. But put your faith in the geologist and give them the tools to try to find something. And then later on, if you want to be a mining engineer and you want to build something, that's the time to maybe properly de-risk it. But at the exploration stage, you have to dream a little bit, which sometimes can be tough for engineers.
Yeah, and you have to be the chief cook and bottle washer, do everything. But my husband's a geologist, and he always says nobody should ever hire him to be a CEO of a company because he's too much of a dreamer. But totally value what they bring to it, and so important. So tell us a little bit about your team.
So the team, so because I'm not a geologist, what I've tried to do is surround myself with really smart people who can offset my shortcomings in that area, and then help me in that learning process that I talked about before. So at the board level, we have a chairwoman, Jackie Allison, who has a PhD in geology, and she's done both exploration as well as investor relations, and then now sits on a couple of boards. So she's very technical. We have Neil Burns, who is VP, I guess now Senior VP, Technical Services at Wheaton Precious. So he brings some of that big company exposure, but also technical background because he's a geologist. Then on the team itself, I have Matt Lapointe, who is our VP Exploration. So he's done some work in Newfoundland, and then also has worked at other projects in Canada, as well as around the world on gold exploration. So he's very technical. He takes this kind of big, broad approach, quite analytical as well. So he's a great asset to have. And then we have right now 5 geologists in Newfoundland, all of whom are, or most of whom are from the East Coast. And we've been very selective about who we bring on. So, one thing that's always been important to me is building a team and building a culture. And so even though Canstar has been around since 2005, this iteration, it was basically a shell when I got involved in 2020. We've had the good fortune of being able to build a team, and basically having people who love the work, who love going out there and trying to find gold and enjoy working together. So we've got a good team in the field. And the other thing that's been great in Newfoundland is we've been able to hire local prospectors and field assistants, who know the area, who again love going out, finding rocks, finding gold, day in, day out. Just fantastic work ethic and attitudes as well. And then the other thing I did, was I brought in 3 technical advisors. So we have an advisory board, with 3 gentlemen on that board, all of whom are PhDs in geology, but more importantly, are quite accomplished and have a lot of experience. So we have Dave Palmer, who is Probe Mining and now Probe Metals. So has been very successful in Ontario and Quebec in terms of gold discoveries. We have Lawrence Winter, who basically put together this claim package that was optioned to Canstar, and Lawrence is the technical services person at Altius. And so he knows Newfoundland like the back of his hand, and saw the potential of our Golden Bay project. And then lastly, I have Laurie Curtis, who has spent more than 40 years in everything from geology, discovery, building mines, to being an equity research analyst also. So very, small company, big project, but I think pretty impressive team in terms of trying to find gold.
So you mentioned Lawrence Winter from Altia. So I had the pleasure of seeing his presentation last week, which I thought was fabulous. Great overview of the potential of the jurisdiction of Newfoundland and Labrador. And but when I was working to put together a panel discussion, Canstar's name came out recommended by a number of people as need to have a panel with them on it. Really like what you're doing, but tell me how you came to be in Newfoundland, and you're in Newfoundland, not Labrador. I just want to make sure we never forget it's both. But how did you come to be there, and how did you come to work with Altius? Because I've heard some very favorable things about your land position.
Yeah, no, that's good to hear always. So again, I mean, I mentioned before, mining is, I think it's a great industry to work in, and it's a pretty small community, even though there are projects all over the world. People in Vancouver, Toronto, a few locations, they're all probably connected by 1 degree of separation. So previously I was with a company called AbraSilver, and Abra has a gold silver exploration project in Argentina. That was a situation where I got involved because it needed some cleanup. It needed some capital, and it also, we needed to renegotiate some property agreements, but really recapitalize it, which I did. And part of that recapitalization was we merged with another company in Toronto that had been spun out of Altius. So they had acquired the copper exploration projects in Chile, very good management team. And so what we decided to do is we took AbraSilver, which had a great project in Argentina, but needed a technical team. And then we took Aethon Minerals, which was the other company that would come out of Altius, and we put them together. And basically, we took the company from, I think, a 5 million market cap, or maybe 6 or 7 pro forma, and today it's about 150 million market cap. So Altius was a shareholder in Aethon, became a shareholder in Abra, made a bunch of money, and still has some royalties on those projects. So obviously that strengthened built a relationship with Altius and Lawrence. Um, so really Canstar came out of that. And the reason it came out of that as well is in Toronto, we have the small office, and it's in the office. Um, it is Altius Minerals with a few people who work out of Ontario, Adventus Mining, which has ties to Altius as well, AbraSilver, the company I was part of before and now am chairman of still. And then Canstar was I guess, sort of the orphan company in that office when I was there, because it had base metal projects in Newfoundland, but it didn't have a CEO. And for all intents and purposes, it was dormant. And so back in 2020, I guess it was around May, June of 2020, when I was really coming out of this other company, AbraSilver, I saw what was going on with Newfound Gold and the Queensway project and some of the drill results that they were getting. And gold prices were also doing very well. So what I said is, hey, in the office here, we have this company called Canstar that has some focus on Newfoundland, but really what it needs to do is it needs to go find a good gold project in Newfoundland and see if it can do something even remotely close to what's happening up at Queensway, because that's a major new world-class discovery in a district that looks like it's got really good scale potential. So I knew a bunch of the directors of Canstar, spoke to them. They liked the idea. So then my next call was to Altius to say, hey, here's this idea. Do you know of any projects that might be available? And the timing was good because Lauren said, yeah, right now I'm trying to option this property package. And if we're successful, this looks a lot like Queensway. It's along what we believe is the same structure. The rocks are very similar. There might be a bit more deformation where we are because we're to the south. But yeah, he thought there was great potential. Still very good access, not as good as Queensway because it's right off the highway in Gander, but we still had highway access, but very little exploration on these claims. So Altius was successful in optioning these claims. They staked around them, and then they optioned them to Canstar with me coming in as CEO. So that's kind of how everything came to be. And then we built a team, and we have been successful in finding some gold, and hopefully we'll find a lot more.
So I'm looking at a map right now, and we'll put it up for people that are viewing this as well. But it kind of you're on a trend that goes sort of lab, then lab gold, then newfound exploits, and then Canstar. So very, very favorable ground, and you see quite a large land position as well, correct?
Yeah, that's right. And we've done a couple of subsequent deals with Altius, and then some other prospectors. And so the total land package now is 774 square kilometers. And it's going to get a little bit bigger than that still as well. Even though we have enough, we see some other prospective ground that we're in the process of picking up. But it's a big land package, and it's elongated because it follows this structure. So there are multiple structures that basically trend from northeast to southwest in Newfoundland that are highly prospective for orogenic gold mineralization. We follow that down on our Golden Bay project, and then there's actually a different structure that curves up called the Hermitage Flexure, which basically takes this interesting turn up towards the west. But the rocks on the, I guess, northwestern or northern margin of that are quite favorable for gold mineralization. And some of those have never been explored. They've seen, or at least not for gold, they've seen some uranium exploration. There's been some base metal exploration there from a long time ago. But no, on the majority of these claims, there's been no modern gold exploration. Now, so far, with the work that we've done and some of the limited historic exploration, in the central portion of that Golden Bay project, we have demonstrated that there's about a 40-kilometer trend of anomalous gold at surface. And these are not necessarily 1 or 2 gram type anomalies. These are high grade. So actually at both ends of this 40-kilometer trend, we've got a couple of samples that have assayed over 60 grams per ton. And then the area that we've really been focused on is called the Kendall prospect. And the reason we focused on that is in 2019, so around the same time as the Keats discovery was made up at Queensway by Newfound Gold. The prospectors down in our area, which is called the Bay Despair area, they found the first instance of visible gold on these claims. And with some prospecting work, they uncovered a sample that assayed 4,485 grams per ton of gold. So confirmed, there was visible gold there. The style was orogenic gold mineralization. So there was an analog for what they were finding at Queensway.
Wow.
So still early days, but it's pretty exciting because we know there's a lot of gold there. That 40-kilometer trend, we've been doing some additional work over the last month or so with a helicopter. Waiting for assays back on a number of those samples, but visually, the indication is this trend is going to get longer, and that certainly does indicate a trend. These are not discrete anomalies. There's definitely big mineralizing events that have taken place there. So that's really the exciting part. And I just watched your podcast actually with Richard Goldfarb, and listening to him about some of the potential. That's what we're seeing as well. We don't know what the key structures are yet. Maybe we're on them. And even on our property, you see, some parallel trends. And so, we could be on something now that's good, but maybe there are better ones. And that's part of what we're trying to figure out is, where is this gold? There is till cover in many instances, which obscures the structures. But, and I'm not a geologist, but I'm smart enough to know that if you have 40 kilometers of anomalous gold, there's a lot of gold lurking there somewhere.
Yeah. I really enjoyed that podcast with Rich. He's looking at it from a global perspective and seeing Newfoundland as one of the 2 best places for economic discoveries, and really sees that as we get more people on the ground, more companies there, more discoveries are going to follow. And I think you're seeing it already. It's starting to the collective approach of working together and sharing information, I think, is making everybody move a little bit faster too. And we actually are going to have Hamish from the Geological Survey coming up on a podcast pretty soon. So I'm really looking forward to that as well. So in 2020, acquired first land, building it up. You had a season last year. What kind of stuff did you do last year? I know you just went through some of the results, but what are sort of the highlights of what you finished off last year on your work program?
Yeah, so last year the team was pretty small, so we've always approached this conservatively, which again, maybe that's my engineering background, but I like to think it's probably more because I approach these things as an investor, and I want to make sure that money is spent wisely. So we try to minimize G&A, and we try to put the money into the ground, and we try to do it in such a way that that I guess it's efficient, if you will. Mm-hmm. Obviously, people want us to drill, but what we try to do is we try to use whatever tools we can to reduce the footprint of drilling, both because it's more economic, but also, we try to be environmentally sensitive, and the less drilling we can do, we think the better it is, because that is more invasive. So we did do some drilling last year, at what we call the Kendall prospect, and we had good results. But that was basically stepping back from a trench where they discovered that 4,000 gram per ton gold sample and trying to follow that mineralization. So the good thing is it starts right at surface. it seems to extend to the northwest, so we think it's actually along a secondary structure, because the dominant regional fabric trends from northeast to southwest, as it does up at Queensway. But it's these secondary structures that seem to be key to this high-grade mineralization. So that's what we've been following. As often seems to be the case in Newfoundland, so far our first hole has been the best one. And we hit 9.6 grams per ton over about 7.75 meters. And that was only 5 meters below the surface. But good grade. We've extended that out probably about 160 meters or so down dip, and have shown pretty good continuity of that mineralization. But these are deep rooted systems. In our case, it's fairly shallow dipping, so it seems to dip at about 30 to 40 degrees, and it's on the side of a hill. So it's only progressively getting deeper. So even our deeper mineralization right now is only about 50 meters deep, and we'll continue to follow that. But it was great to see that we had VG in quartz veins. We get some gold associated with disseminated sulfides as well. And basically what we're trying to do is follow these structures, because likely where they intersect other structures, hopefully we get more dilation and therefore broader widths. But even so far, hitting anything from kind of a meter to 11, 12 meters of mineralization is a pretty good start. And as Rich Goldfarb indicated, I mean, these things don't tend to be discrete. If you have it in one place, you're going to get it in multiple places, and our 40-kilometer trend of anomalies kind of supports that as well. So the other nice thing about that is, now that we have mineralization from the drill holes that we drilled last year, it gives us a better understanding of what the controls on that may be. If they're indicator minerals, seem to be graphitic shales that are quite important in relation to the gold mineralization as well. So we've learned a lot. The other thing we did last year is trenching. So again, where there's outcrop, if we can identify the best parts of the mineralization, the closer we get to the bedrock source, the better it is to drill it. Because the one thing that doesn't really work in Newfoundland is if you just do offensive drill holes and you space them out, say 50 meters or something, you're probably going to miss these systems. So you have to understand the orientation to the extent that you can figure out what tools work, and we throw everything at it. I mean, we'll try mag, we'll try EM, soil sampling. Last year we did the first batch of till sampling, which actually worked very well, which is consistent with what you see in the rest of Newfoundland as well. But we tried a lot of things last year to see what would work, and then we'll build on that this year. So with the till sampling that I mentioned, we had ODM do that, and those guys are great because they look at the gold grains under a microscope. They count them just to give you a sense of which areas may have more gold. But then the other really good tool, because you have this till cover, is they look at the extent of the deformation of those gold grains. And what it suggests based on the work from last year is we've got a couple of trends that are highly anomalous in terms of gold grains, but then also it doesn't look like there's been a lot of movement from glaciation. So then we know we're in the right area. We can tighten that up. We're going to try some IP geophysics on that just to see if we can get a better sense of what's where. Because it's really, you can't trench there. And so you're either drilling blind or using these other methods. So yeah, tills seem to work. We're going to try some, kind of getting into this year's program now as well, but we're going to try some deeper soil samples as well, just more till sampling. And the whole intent of that is just to reduce that footprint from something that was about 5 kilometers by 1 kilometer, shrink it down into maybe a couple of areas, and then we'll drill those. So that's really the goal this year, is figure out what the source of this gold is, where some of these fairly tight structures are as well, and then actually drill them.
Yeah, it's, there's so, I've heard so many times, people get pressure from investors to get out there and drill. And it's such an expensive mistake if you don't have the science and the boots on the ground first. And I think one of the things I really like about this industry is that combination of traditional boots on the ground, looking at the rocks, which you have to do, and combining it with the science that you're talking about. But yeah, as always, there's the pressure for the drilling, but keep thinking about that 4,000 gram per ton sample. I'd love to see that. Like, I've seen a 3,000 gram per ton sample. And it was spectacular. But that'd be pretty nice. So I hope you find it. And find more. I know you found some.
Yeah, we want to find more of that. And I mean, obviously, grab sampling is selective, and if that is a very nice sample, the 4,000 grams, because you get coarse gold in that. But last year we found another sample. It was actually a boulder. It was about 100-pound boulder, and assays on that came back at 289 grams per ton of gold, which obviously doesn't sound nowhere near as exciting, but it was a bigger sample. Very nice gold mineralization in that as well. And that came about 1.2 kilometers away from where we've been drilling and up ice. So we know, that's got a different source. And so that's one of the goals for this year, is find out, where did that boulder come from?
Yeah.
And that boulder is pretty angular. So it's not a rounded boulder that's been rolling around and rolling around. It's the source is nearby. But yeah, I mean, I guess people have to understand. I mean, we've got a massive property. It's about, on average, I guess it's 150 kilometers long by about 5 kilometers wide. And then, even with this smaller focus area, you're literally trying to find a needle in a haystack when you're using the drill. And if I go back to my other company, AbraSilver, I mean, that's a different type of deposit that we have in Argentina. And the drilling there is very forgiving. Because you'll hit 150, 200 meters of mineralization. It's a big system. This in Newfoundland is different, and it's early. It's, people are just discovering this, trying to figure out what works, but it's high grade in discrete locations. And I think, one of the good things that Newfound Gold has done is they move people off this notion that you have to have big step outs and widely spaced drilling, because if you do that there, unless you're super lucky, you're going to miss a lot of this mineralization. And people have missed it, whether it's on our property or even at Queensway. I mean, there was a great trench there at Keats. They had some drill holes, but it was only when they drilled deeper and started tightly spaced drilling that they really started to put it together. And now it's something that's world class with big intercepts and just fantastic grade. But it does, even if you look at the Queensway drill results, you get some of these fabulous holes and intercepts, but then around it, you get some things that are okay. And it's just the density of their drilling is really what helps define this. So that's important. And because of that, it takes time. As easy as it is for investors to say, well, just go drill a bunch of holes. We can do that. But if we come back with a bunch of results that are mediocre, the market's going to write off the project.
Yeah, and you're going to be out of money.
And we'll be out of money. So the goal certainly is use these other methods, which are much more cost effective, and just identify certain locations. And we've got lots of targets, so we'll do some more work. We'll prioritize those, and then I want to make sure that when we drill them, that our probability of hitting something is going to be very high.
Yeah, and people, you have to have patience, right? You have to do it right. You have to be methodical, go step by step. And I think it's really important to be in a solid jurisdiction in order to have that confidence, because there's been so many challenges in so many jurisdictions because the certainty and the ability to permit all, become challenges. So if you're investing in Newfoundland and Labrador, I think it's really important to talk about certainty. And the premier of the province recently did a presentation at PDAC in Toronto, and his message to the investment community and the industry was, we're giving you certainty. And the industry is important to the people, and it's important to the government, and it provides jobs and contracts. But his message about certainty, I think, is extremely important, because it allows you to be able to build to that point where you can take these early stage projects and advance them.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely key. And I approach these things as an investor. So my involvement with Canstar, for instance, is really as an investor, more so than just to draw a salary. But yeah, I think for investors as well, I mean, you want to make sure that if you find gold or if you build a mine, that you're going to be able to keep it. And there are so many jurisdictions, typically, not first world, there are second world, third world, where what happens is there's greed always kicks in and politics kicks in, and people see something, that's a major discovery. Governments are very good at spending money. They're not good at raising money unless they raise taxes. So what they inevitably do is they look at lucrative projects and they say, oh well, that's kind of it's kind of ours, and so we want a bigger piece of it. In places like Latin America now, there's this big shift to the left, and we just saw it with Colombia as well. But Colombia, Chile, Peru, you get big political changes underway there. And what that does is it changes the outlook on the economics of the mineral projects there. And that's bad from an investment perspective. And you see what's going on in the bigger market right now. Equity markets don't like uncertainty. What they like to do is they like to take future cash flows and discount them back and say, today it's worth this, and if I can get it at a discount to that, then that's good value. Well, if you introduce that uncertainty, what that means is there's a higher risk rate. Your discount rate goes up, which means, because the future cash flows are less certain, they're not worth as much today. Well, yeah, that is the case when you go to, any place, I'd say, where, one election can change, your royalty rates or your tax rates, or even how much you own of a project. So, I mean, me personally, I don't, I invest in places that I know. I don't, there are a lot of jurisdictions I won't go into, even though, places like Mongolia, they're, great mineral endowment, but, just governments that you don't want to be at the mercy of. And so just, personally, I stay away from those. So on the flip side, to have Newfoundland with that certainty is wonderful. But then the other aspect is, I'm used to going to projects that are in the Andes and 4,000 meters elevation. You're excited when there's power within 100 kilometers. Here, we have highways, we've got a skilled workforce. There's power available, there's water. I mean, it's just it's everything you want when you go looking for projects. I think that's the exciting thing about Newfoundland now as well.
Yeah, and I think even in first world jurisdictions, Newfoundland and Labrador is going to emerge as one of the shining stars in the first world. And a lot of times people offer, how do you make your investment management? It always comes up, but mine's jurisdiction first and then management. Go to the right jurisdiction where you can take a project and have certainty you can keep moving it, and then find the right people. And I think Canstar's doing it all right. But I'm going to go back a little bit to the market, because it's frustrating. But The broader markets, well, today, I think the Dow's up about 700, so maybe today doesn't count, but broader markets having some issues. Gold's 1850. It's still a great price, but I think the place to be going forward, one of the sectors is gold. And just wanted to, you've got your background from an analyst position, so maybe talk a little bit about where you see this going.
Sure. Yeah. No, I love talking about markets. And and I still invest a lot and follow the markets very closely. But yeah, as we can see right now, I mean, you have all these micro factors in terms of jurisdiction and management, drill results. But you can see it right now. Companies are putting out drill results, and the stock may sell off. The market doesn't care because the macro influence, is outweighing whatever's going on at a company level. And so it's usually important. And then I think what's equally important is you look at the fundamentals and you say, well, is this warranted? Is this, especially in our space, is this warranted, or is this an opportunity? And I think it is an opportunity because, as you said, gold's been actually remarkably steady. It's influenced by the dollar, obviously, in rates, but it's been holding in pretty close to 1850 an ounce. In Canadian dollars, it's even better. And so it's providing stability, which it's supposed to. And then, if you really look at how strong the US dollar has been, which is typically the case when there's volatility, but when you look at the US dollar, in different currencies, it's actually done very well. And then when you break down what is wrong in terms of the macro environment, it's predominantly inflation. It's inflation, which is triggering central banks to raise rates. Now, of course, that inflation came about because governments printed money and just introduced so much liquidity into the system during COVID. And now they're having a hard time weaning off of that. So I actually think that, the spending by the governments is going to continue probably at a rate higher than what it should be. The consumer is, especially the US consumer, is fine. So I think we're going to have to be prepared to live with inflation. And I think politically, governments are going to be okay with it because they have all this debt now. And they'll be kind of happy to inflate their way out of that. So I wouldn't be surprised if inflation pulls back, but it might still be 4 or 5%, and people will be comfortable with that, and the Fed will stop raising rates. Well, what that means is your currency, whether it's US dollars or other currencies, they're getting devalued. That's effectively what inflation is. You can't buy as much. Prices are going up. Your dollar isn't going to go as far, and that's why people turn to hard assets and especially gold. So I think smart money is and will continue to buy hard assets that are going to appreciate even as currencies devalue. So gold should go up from here. And then I think also, assuming the Fed really doesn't kill the economy, which nobody wants to see, then I think other commodities like copper, oil's in a kind of a state of its own right now, but copper, nickel, silver, I think they're all going to do well. And they're going to really protect your purchasing power. And so that's going to be good for mining companies. And the miners have been pretty disciplined, unlike previous cycles. So I think it's a good investment category. And then what we need is just to make sure that money does go into exploration, because there haven't been a lot of new discoveries. They're few and far between. The exploration dollars aren't really there. And I think, for that, we need to see some more success. Need to see, last year we had Great Bear, and company or investors who got in early with that did phenomenally well. So we want to see more cases like that. You want to see money go in, make these phenomenal, attractive returns that justify the risk. And I think, again, when we go back to jurisdiction, where are you going to find that? Yeah, there are other jurisdictions that are exciting in Canada. You get Golden Triangle, you get Abitibi and stuff. But I think Newfoundland looks better than all of them right now. I mean, it hasn't been picked over. It's early days. And I think you're going to see some more big discoveries there, and that'll get people excited and hopefully keep the money flowing so we can keep looking.
Here, this is, I hope I make sense in my comment. So I hope to see more majors getting involved and behind some explorers. I think they haven't been there because governments have a tendency of setting policy when things are too good. So, mining's doing great, let's put up the royalty rates, or let's make the environmental assessment process more difficult. And I think the majors see that. And why would you want to invest more in an industry that's pulling you back? So I'm hoping during this time, when things get a little bit more difficult and in the economy, that there'll be some policy changes that are going to then incentivize in some way the majors to get more involved. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think that makes sense. And then there's another aspect to it as well, which is there's always competition for capital. And so governments have to be cognizant of that, because you can't just put on your blinders and say, hey, we've got a great jurisdiction, our rules are pretty good, so come explore. If another jurisdiction makes permitting easier or provides certain incentives, then the capital is more likely to flow there because that's what capital does. But typically, I mean, you look at the majors, you look at what they've been doing, and by and large, the investments are going into stable jurisdictions. We've seen some big M&A actually with the mining companies where they're trying to get more exposure to North America. And I think because it's lower risk, higher certainty. But governments have to, especially as times get tougher, governments are going to have to work harder to attract capital because it does move, and they need to be responsive. So,
yeah, no, I agree. It's I think where your company is right now is a great place to be. I see a lot of progressive work from the government. Great potential for discovery. I think you're right place, right time, right?
Yeah, and I think the government sees the long-term potential, which is great. Because I mean, you look at the population of Newfoundland and Labrador, and if you can foster some of these projects along and they become significant producers, I mean, that's going to have a dramatic impact on the fiscal aspects of Newfoundland. The province needs it right now as well, which I think is going to work in our favor. I mean, it's there's too much debt and not enough revenue. So to the extent that our industry can generate new revenues, both in terms of taxes and royalties, but also job creation, then I think that's going to be very good. And my sense of the government right now is that they recognize that. They see it as a solution. And I think they're going to try to the extent possible, try to foster more exploration and more mine development.
Yeah, I think the other thing they've got going for them is a population that has the expertise in the sector. I lived in a mining town in northern Canada. 2/3 of the people were from the Rock, and all they wanted to do was work at home. So you have the skilled sector that understands wealth creation for the family and for businesses from the sector, which makes it not easier on the government, but it helps clarify where the populace stands and allows the government to make the decisions they're making, which have helped us all, I think. Anything else you want to add that we haven't talked about today? So this year you're busy. Maybe we'll just this year you're busy getting ready to identify drill targets. That's the big goal.
Yeah, that's the big goal, really. And people try to pin us down on exactly where we're going to drill and how much we're going to drill. And I mean, the real answer is we don't know. It's hopefully as much as possible, but we did do some drilling this past winter, so we'll have the results coming out shortly. But yeah, it's all this other work between till sampling, geophysics, where we're just going to tighten up the targets. And so we will be drilling again in late summer, fall. We'll have multiple areas that we're going to drill in. But the other thing that we're doing as part of that, we'll be testing out, is just using basically an auger drill, which isn't really a drill, but in these areas with till cover to collect deep soil samples. So we're going to see how that works. If we can get a sample close to the bedrock, I think there's a strong correlation between gold mineralization and then both arsenic and antimony. As well as sometimes we see tungsten in there as well. But if we can get these indicators, I think we'll be able to, in a very cost-effective and fairly efficient manner, narrow down these areas, and that's what we're going to drill. So yeah, it remains to be seen exactly how much we'll be drilling, but we've got about $6 million budgeted for this year, and then. I'd say there'll be, well, it might be close to half of that is going to be allocated to drilling, but yeah, all the other money is going to go into generating new targets and then really tightening up these targets, because I want to make sure that when we drill, we are going to have good results, and we know there's gold there. Goal is to find it.
Well, and one thing I learned from Rich Goldfarb, orogenic systems, tungsten and gold travel together. There's my non-geological analysis for you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Rob. It's been a pleasure, and I'm going to keep an eye on what you're doing, and we'll catch up with you later in the year, and wish you all the best. Again, on the TSX-V, ROX, rocks. And have a great season. And thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, no, thanks. It was good talking to you.
Yeah, and thanks for everybody for joining us. Keep following us. We continue to have a group of interesting speakers throughout the season, and just stay tuned. And thanks again for joining Kiss the Cod.